Hi, and welcome to Instagram TV, critiques of the photographs you submit to us. I'm Rob Knoll. This is Bryan Caparici, as I'm sure you know. And today we are going to be critiquing another fabulous photograph that has been submitted by one of the viewers. So let's dig in. Bryan, where do you want to take us with this image?
So this is, an engagement session image, obviously, or at least I would think is an engagement session image. And one of the things that I want to start off talking about is oftentimes it's so difficult to get real moments, to get genuine interaction, to get a couple feeling comfortable in front of the lens. And so I want to start by commending the photographer by saying you obviously created an environment for this couple to just be themselves, to be natural, to interact, to have fun, to play, enough that they kind of let their guard down so that you were able to kind of be an observer of that moment. So huge kudos to you. You're obviously doing a lot right to be able to get this kind of image. And that's a big part of what a finished image will look like by you creating that environment. That being said, on the technical side, I do have a couple of concerns with this image. And I'm going to start with this big white vastness up here. Our eyes often go to the brightest part of an image, and in this particular image there's a big white blob above the couple's head, and it's very distracting for me. So I would love to have seen just a slightly different angle on this image to get rid of that. I think if the photographer had elevated their camera position up a little bit higher, then you probably would have gotten more of this in the background, and you would have avoided all this white space up there, and you probably would have made a little bit more of an overall pleasing image because of that. So that's one small critique there. I also have some slight concerns with the posing on this particular shot. Now, again, this is a candid moment. It's a natural, genuine sort of interaction with the couple, so they're not going to be having this laugh out loud moment and you'd be like, wait, stop that for a minute, I need to tweak your hand, right? So I mean, you have to be mindful. I'm hopeful that the photographer has a couple shots before this and probably also a couple shots after this. Maybe this is just not the right moment to be sharing, but his hand is getting a little bit grabby in this shot, so I would just kind of be mindful of that. I'm also not loving her hand position. It kind of just seems to be falling flat there without really any movement or anything happening. And then the last thing is I actually can't quite see her other arm, and so I would just kind of be mindful of that, be mindful of positioning, be mindful of little details in your posing like that, because it does make a big difference in that finished image. Now, this image might go great, or I think it would go great in a series. If you're going to do a book, if you're going to do sort of a triptych or a collage, it would go great as a standalone image. For me, for those reasons, the white blob and sort of the hand positioning and all that, it makes it a little bit less strong of an image as a standalone image to be putting on a wall.
Awesome. Okay. Well, let me jump in. So first off, as Bryan pointed out earlier, it's like your eye tends to go to the brightest part of the image. Well, she's in very bright clothes. He's got bright, and they're against all this bright. So it's probably not the best contrast for foreground and background in terms of subject matter versus background. The difficulty here is that if you put her against a dark background, her hair is going to bleed right into that. So placement of this couple needs to be thought about a little bit more, especially when you're changing a shot like this into black and white. In color, the colors might actually aid in separating subject from background and so forth. But when you go black and white, now we're just dealing in tones. And so her hair is going to disappear against these dark trees up here. His shirt is going to start to bleed into these areas down here. So you need to be very cautious of those things. A couple other things for me that are kind of problematic in this shot are the fact that this couple is sort of centered. Centered so heavily in the frame. And I don't usually love that. It's kind of something we as professionals try to steer away from. It's not that you need to be locked into the rule of thirds necessarily, because some people overdo that. But just in terms of composition, it's just too centered for me in that regard. The other thing I notice is a very heavy use of vignetting here. So you're literally losing all kinds of shadow detail in these areas here, like the tree here, none at all. So again, a bit problematic for me there. And then also this leg, which I've already kind of pointed out to you, to me is quite a big distraction. I think the shot should be cropped here. And if anything, I'd probably make this kind of my cropping for the shot, sort of rectangular, put them in the lower right-hand side of the frame if you're going to use the shot as is. And I guess a final comment I would like to make is this. And again, as Bryan pointed out, there's some great expression going on here. That's great. But much of this just looks very like grab shot. It's probably a bad term to use right here. However,
a snapshot.
A snapshot. Thank you. So the thing is that everybody in our industry says today that we're an oversaturated market. Everybody with a camera is called a photographer. And our job as professional photographers is to take the kinds of images that other people can't. And I guess the thing that I ask right here when I look at a photograph like this is, if someone had a point and shoot camera and they were walking down the path with this couple and they just turned around to take a picture, could they have taken this photograph? I think they could have. And so for me, when I'm thinking about what makes us stand apart in our industry, like what makes us stand out amongst all the amateurs with cameras, is we've got to be creating images that merge the technical with the emotional with the artistic. And I think this shot has merits of its own, but it doesn't have all those merits. And I would like to see, you know, as you continue to take photographs like this, please, you're really getting the spontaneity of the moment. And technically it's sharp and you're capturing that. But you need to think more about the backgrounds. You need to think more about the framing, and you need to think more about the composition. And then maybe in post-processing, not as heavily handed as the vignetting is here, I think.
I want to talk just about the post-processing on this. When you're going to do a black and white conversion, obviously there's a number of ways that you can do a black and white conversion. And I think sometimes the default for a lot of photographers is just to dump the saturation slider down and just turn it into a monochrome image. To me, this image looks like that has not been done, which is good, because if you use, you know, the HSL sliders, or you use a proper black and white conversion, even beyond just using a preset, because even presets don't really give you a lot of control over the black and white conversion. If you're using Lightroom or Adobe Camera Raw or anything like that, you can control each channel, and you can say, well, I'm going to go black and white, but I want the orange and red and yellow channels to go brighter or darker. I want the green channels to go darker. You have a lot more control on that kind of conversion. And I would say to the photographer that they did a really nice job, in my opinion, on this black and white conversion. Like Rob said, maybe a little bit heavy-handed, because you've got a lot of darks over here, a lot of darks up and over here, even over here, and that could be because of the vignette more so than the black and white conversion. But definitely, I think the photographer did a nice job on the conversion here. And just as a lesson, take that home to say, you know, you can do so much more to a black and white conversion if you're going to use those more advanced channel techniques versus just doing, you know, a desaturation with your saturation channel. So keep that in mind as you do it. Be mindful of skin tones. Be mindful of what it does to your background. But other than that, I think that's a great critique of this image.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Instagram TV. We'll see you on the next image.
See you next time.